Okay, so we'll get things going. I have 10:03 in Mountain Time Zone, so noon for those of you out in the East. And so I'll just give the few administrative remarks at the start, do some introductions, and then hand it over to Isaac, who's gonna give the majority of the presentation. So as with all of our webinars, we are recording the webinars for everyone knows. So all of the content that you see presented will be posted on our YouTube channel for viewing after the fact and posted to our website. We'll also send it out to everybody who was on this call, as well as a survey asking for your input on the webinar. I would just ask everybody to take a couple of minutes and quickly complete that survey if you don't mind, so we can use it to inform how we move forward in the future. The questions and chat that you type in will not be sort of viewable as part of the webinar, just the content that we speak or the questions that we repeat. So on that, as it relates to questions, we encourage people to ask questions as we go through. You can use the Q&A function that you see in the Zoom call. I assume many of you are familiar with this. I think we've all been using Zoom for all of these things for a while. So please type your questions in as we go and or at the end. And we've left quite a bit of time for questions so we can have a bit of a conversation there. I will say this for those of you who've been attending the Canary webinars this week as well, I appreciate you joining our call. I know we're getting webinared out. I am. This is my third one in 3 days. But one thing that did come up in a conversation I was having with someone after the fact was the desire to make these webinars a little bit more interactive. So less in terms of the webinar focus, but more in terms of a Zoom or a Teams call where everyone could talk. If that's something you're interested in, I'd be eager for you to provide that feedback when we send out that questionnaire. It was an interesting question that I've been thinking about since we had that discussion. So with that, I will move into some quick introductions. So I'm excited to say that today you won't be hearing from me. My name is Jill Kowalchuk. If you haven't seen me before, I am the director for CanSSOC. I'm pleased that today's presentation will be given by Isaac Straley. Isaac is the Chief Information Security Officer for CanSSOC. He also is the Chief Information Security Officer for the University of Toronto, one of the partners that is part of the CanSSOC project. Also on the call, we have Hugo Dominguez, who works with McGill University, another key partner that's part of CanSSOC initiative. And Hugo's responsibilities for infrastructure is the Director of Infrastructure and Security. And that's not his exact title, but it's pretty close. My apologies, Hugo. We also have with us today Indranil Joshi. It's my pleasure to introduce Indranil. He started on the CanSSOC team a couple of months ago and definitely been putting his feet to the fire. You might have seen some emails from him related to different incidents and alerts that we have noticed over the last couple of months. Indranil is our security operations manager and has done a substantial amount of work over the last couple of months, getting up to speed and supporting us as we move forward. So you'll be seeing and hearing a lot more of Indranil. We've given him a little bit of a break on the first one so that he can listen and watch, but we'll be here to ask any questions, and we wanted to make sure everyone is introduced. So Isaac, with that, I think I will turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Jill. Just confirming you can hear me okay?
Yep, you're great.
Great, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here and talk with you again. It's been a while. I'm really excited about our presentation today. The last couple of webinars that we've done have really been focused on some of the individual services and some of the individual components, and certainly we had some aspects of some more technical areas that we talked about. Today we're going to sort of bring all of that back together and paint a picture of how we can take these individual services to provide, as the title of the webinar says, actionable intelligence. And that's really what's, I think, a big and important part about what we're trying to do here. And when I say we and trying to do, I'm not talking about just CanSSOC, but collectively everybody who is on this call, who's in the country, trying to figure out how we work together to secure this infrastructure and to move forward with the things we're really trying to do, especially during these challenging times, we're all here to find ways to make it actionable. The work, the time, the money, the effort that we put into these things have to pay off. And so what I'd like to do today is really talk you through sort of how all of these things are moving forward. And I'm going to leave some time, so this is not as interactive as I think we might want to get in these webinars, as Jill mentioned, but I'm definitely going to leave some time for questions and comments so we can have a greater discussion through these items. But let's dig right in. So the place I'd like to start is really taking a moment to reflect on where CanSSOC sits in sort of the national picture as we look at all of the different things that are happening, the different services that are going on, the different innovations that are happening, the different players. And so, you know, as we've talked before, we got a lot of questions about, you know, what exactly is CanSSOC doing, and where exactly how does it fit in these pieces? And today we're going to be talking a lot about what the pieces that CanSSOC has is, but I want to recognize a couple of different things. The first is, and we've talked to you about this sort of informal measurement that we use as we work through this project, which is the efforts that we're putting into CanSSOC are things that are better than we can do on our own. And again, we as the individual institutions who are participating, we certainly have a number of institutions that are our founding members who sort of got the ball rolling on this. We now have a number of institutions across the country who are participating in a different number of services. And there are others who are just getting started on the road to how we work together. But wherever you're at in that journey, we all have something better we can do. Even the institutions who have been doing this for a while certainly recognize that the investments we've made could be better. We could get getting more value for them. And this is one of the reasons why we really want to work together, is that we think that we can do things better, do them cheaper, and do them collectively, especially when we work together, we know we can be better. The part that we haven't talked about, I think, directly as much, is that we're also doing this always in partnership. And so this, the image here represents just some of the pieces of the puzzle that form, I think, what is going to be an effective strategy to secure this infrastructure, to secure our data, and to, like I said, move us forward. You know, I'll throw out a couple names here. You can see it on here, but you know, the efforts through Canary and the cybersecurity initiative are obviously things we've been spending a lot of time talking about. The NREM partners and the provincial networks are really working hard to provide services as well. CIRA has the DNS firewall and other services they're bringing online. The cybersecurity awareness, some of those areas. You've heard a lot about these, so I'm not going to belabor those points. But the reality is all of these players are working together, are figuring out how they're working together. And CanSSOC is determined to be a player in this landscape, not you know, a hub. Sorry. Not taking the lead in all of this, but participating as a partner in all of this. And certainly you could see as we grow over time, this picture would even grow with different participating members working together. But more than just sort of the general direction that we're talking about, what's important is to really start to focus in on areas of specialty, because when you say security operations, this can be a number of things. And so CanSSOC, our goal is really specializing in detection and response. And I'm using words here that align with the NIST cybersecurity framework. We seem to have an emerging conversation around this and alignment in terms of using these words. So detection and response is really where we're trying to get to build our expertise, to build the services, to build a center of excellence around all of these areas. The reality is a number of things. So certainly the threats are increasing in complexity, increasing scale, increasing in the knowledge of the actors behind them and the technology that they use. And we can talk big, bold, like nation state attacks, or we can talk, you know, just sort of the average things on the internet and what any institution might have to do, whatever their maturity or capability to defend against those things. And all of those levels are increasing. In addition, detection and response is incredibly expensive. This is one of the areas where when you look at the tools that you need, especially with what the adversaries have, again, whatever their level of complexity or maturity, it's just a very expensive space. I think you know that, but this is part of our justification for the reasons we're spending so much time in this space. In addition, the cost of building the expertise is also high. You can't just bring tools to the table, you have to bring people and processes. And certainly when I looked at the investments at my own institution, and when we looked sort of collectively and had conversations about what was needed across the country in terms of where there was not sufficient investment and where there was investment that really needed some specialized expertise, detection response is what really stands out. So the idea that we can find what's happening quickly and shut it down before it becomes more of a problem than it already is. A number of the initiatives across the country are filling in other spaces. And one of the things that we're doing in the services we're building is there are services that sort of bleed outside of detection and response, but our goal is to build the services that really enhance our capabilities to either do this or provide like a center of excellence to talk about the procedures, processes, all of these areas where if you're not using the services, you can still get value out of it, because that's part of a big piece of this. Is it's not just services, but it's also building the culture, the awareness, and the knowledge that we have around this. But really, from the Canslock perspective and the services we're going to be talking about, it's really about focusing on detection and response. And so one of the things that we're doing here as you look at these services is really building operational coordination. There are a number of places where coordination is happening or could be happening in all of these services in the security landscape we're talking about. And the graphic on this slide doesn't represent a definitive statement about the players or how they connect, but it's just showing you that there's a space where you've got CCCS and other governmental agencies putting out alerts and notifications and even providing services. You've got the NREN and the NREN partners who are doing the SIM deployment. You've got programs like OnCheck and things that are happening in Cybera and BCNet, and there's, I could name something in each of the provincial networks that's really amazing. But there's all of these services that are happening, and each of those areas, especially the partners, have a lot of their own coordination that they're doing. So this is not to say that CanSSOC is doing all the coordination, but when we look at a focus on detection and response and coordination in terms of getting alerts that are coming from REN ISAC, which if you're not familiar with REN ISAC, it's a higher education consortium of security experts who are talking internationally and globally. We've got other global partners who we're working with their threat intelligence to blend them into what we're doing. And so what we've got the ability to do is facilitate those conversations, facilitate that exchange of information, not to, again, to dominate the approach, but to coordinate it so that there is one place where we can at least have information, have knowledge, and have services that support those efforts. And conversely, learn from everybody. So one of the things we can do is help in sort of a center of excellence approach is help see what's happening that's really good from an operational perspective around detection and response, and escalate that, highlight that. Even in some of these conversations, maybe we can step out of the way and show what others are doing through part of that process. But that's not what you came to hear. That's just sort of setting the stage. So as you know, with a new area, a new program, there's an evolution in the language that we use, that anybody uses with talking about these things. And so I think we're at the place now where we can really talk about not only the services themselves, but how they connect. And so with this clear focus on detection and response, there are two sort of categories of services that come out than the way we've organized them. So there is basic detection and response services, and that's a lot of the things you've been hearing about. And I'm going to talk through both the things you've heard about and more, and how they sort of fit into this fundamental package. And fundamental is another word to use here. These are the things that, especially without a significant amount of time and investment, the fundamental things that we think for detection and response are going to continue to move that needle to continue to get us to where we need to be. And then there's advanced detection and response, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about today, but these are the areas that we might think about when we're talking more traditionally about a SOC, especially one with log ingesting and doing really sort of advanced analysis and looking at those areas. And so to me, this is a really important framework to understand sort of the differences in what we're trying to work in. So the basic detection and response services include things like our threat alert service, and I'm going to break each of these apart in detail. So our threat alert service, which is actually sending out notifications so institutions can see what's happening at their institution. An advisory service where we can curate more information and send out something that's more relevant specifically to our sector. the threat feed service, which you've heard a lot about, and it's growing right now, and it's really exciting. The new vulnerability management service, we talked a little bit about that in the last webinar, and we're going to share some more information today. And trying to find other partnerships. So we're looking at the continuous monitoring service and seeing if we can find a partnership there, and more to come. And the idea is these all provide a foundation where we don't have to spend a lot of time and energy and effort to start to have the foundation of what detection and response, and sort of consistent is probably not the right word, but something that we can see kind of in common across the fundamental needs that we all have in this space. As we continue to build out the foundation, we're working on the advanced detection and response services. We're doing a lot of work in that space, and we'll be talking more about that in the coming days. So let's take a look at each of those services, some of which we've talked about and some of which we haven't talked about. The first is the threat alert service. So this is, and one of the big pieces that we can add in terms of adding expertise to all the data that are out there and the services that are already being provided, whether we're providing them directly through CanSSOC or they're being provided by another partner in the landscape, is curating the information. And so the threat alert service is where we have analysts who are manually curating alerts that we send out to individual institutions based off of whatever intelligence that we've got access to. And so this could be our own services that we're providing. This could be information that CCCS or other governmental partners are providing, or REN ISAC, who we're building out our relationships more with, or if it's coming out of the Curation benchmarking project, and if it's something that we've got access to, or other member institutions see something. I like to call this more informally our if we see something, we say something service. And so what that means is we don't have to receive logs to be able to participate, we don't have to receive logs to be able to deliver this service. There's a lot of this rich information, most of it's external views, but there's a lot of information here and in the darknet and other services that and areas that we're looking at expanding into. But the key point is this doesn't require us to send logs. You also don't have to be a member of CanSSOC to be able to participate, to get the value out of this. If we get information from any of these sources, and we see another institution, especially a post-secondary institution in Canada that has this, we're going to send out the alert because this is part of the good steward practices, right? We're not a managed service provider that's focused on providing services based off of the money we get. We're interested in really raising the bar in detection response across the country. And so what we see as the objectives with this is not only to get information, actionable information out there, but again, to start to set sort of what that baseline looks like for our ability to share information and to have actionable threat alerting. And that's a big piece of this. This isn't going to be blasts of messages, and we're already doing this. So I should say it's not blasts of messages. It's not an endless stream of like SIM or other automated alerts. This is somebody's curating it and say, here's something you really need to focus on. Here's the information you need to help with it, and I'm here to help you if you've got more questions. In addition, as we do this curation, we can also start to build out business logic that we can use to automate processes where it does make sense to automate it, where we have high confidence based off of the curated information, and we can continue to deliver that in an automated fashion in the services that we're building. But in addition, in the Center of Excellence model, we can also deliver shareable playbooks or other information. And so this is, to me, the sort of where the rubber hits the road is getting this information out to individual institutions. So again, this is an alert to an individual institution about something that's active in their environment. The next leg of this is a more general advisory service. And so after threat alerts are generated to individual institutions, the analysts will also review the information and see if there's something that is more broadly applicable to the environment. Some things are going to be unique to an institution. Some of them are going to be bigger issues that we've seen. And again, this is not necessarily going to be just CanSSOC analysts determining this, but this might be advisories from other areas. And so we've been talking a lot with CCCS about, is there a way we can take their alerts and do some normalization as well there too, or if we can add on to them for something that's sector specific. And that's, again, one of the things, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel with what's already out there or what's happening that's effective. But what we do want to do is make sure that we get, especially those things that are unique to our sector and that are timely. So that's another big piece of this, is making making sure if we see something happening in a couple different places, we want to get some information out so people can act on it. This is one of the more manual processes, both in delivering the advisory services and the institutions have to consume it, but we also think that educational awareness is a big part of growing our expertise and being able to actively respond to areas. And again, this goes out to the broad community. So people do not have to be CanSSOC members to get the value out of this. The last piece that really forms these sort of core sort of threat services especially is the threat feed service. And this is the one we've talked about before. And in fact, many of you are probably using it to some fashion. So we are maintaining a list of current and curated tagged threat data that can be leveraged by automated systems, can be leveraged by analysts, and even are deployed in a block list and allow list format that allows you to just automate using those IOCs and those other threat intelligence information to protect the network. And that's a really good example of the threat feed service it is critical to build a detection and response function. You have to have quality threat information to be able to detect on it. Obviously, advanced functionality uses things like machine learning and AI and other really cool techniques to do some really deep level analysis, but it's expensive and you need a lot of log information to do it. And you still need to start with who your threat actors are. If you look at all the things that have recently happened related to there's my name blanking on me, the SolarWinds attack that affected a large number of institutions, a number of the pundits who have come out, and even some of the organizations that were affected, like Microsoft, have come out and said, the foundation of response that we need at this level is threat intelligence and sharing threat information. Now, threat feed services is how we do that. And I continue to be really excited about not only the service itself, but the adoption that we have with it. And so for us, we built the threat feed service to add this contextual data to our advanced detection and response services. But the work of McGill and others have been really phenomenal to deploy a service that allows anybody to consume this information at the level that they can consume it. So again, whether when you want to have analysts working directly with it, or when you go all the way down to just automating some block lists just to get some basic level of protections. At University of Toronto, we took the block list and implemented it, and the initial numbers we saw, a 30% decrease in our traffic just from blocking that information. And so far it's been so good that I don't think we're going to remove that. We're going to continue to sort of see what's happening, but even an institution like U of T is taking a lot of advantage from the curated block list. You know, we really believe in this and we're using it. That's really exciting. So words help, but I think it's also important to see some pictures. And this is a bit of a complex diagram, so I'm going to walk you through a couple pieces of it. But this is the sort of thing that you're going to start seeing out of the work that we're doing, which is as we work on processes, we're going to be sharing this information. Transparency in the work that we're doing is a really important part about this, not only so you can have trust that the services are meaningful to you, but also so if you want to replicate them, if you want to do your own thing. Again, we're not in the service provider category, we're not doing this to be a service provider. We're doing it because we think that's where the investment makes sense. But we want to share the information out so everybody can enrich their information and enrich their processes through it. So taking a look at a couple of areas, on the left side of this, you've got a number of threat intelligence sources. And again, this is not a comprehensive list of all the threat intelligence sources we will be having as we onboard this, but you've got our threat intelligence platforms, which share the information. You've got open source intelligence, research that the analysts are doing. What was really exciting, and I think, again, part of our value proposition is having the different partners provide information. And so this is when you see things that come out of, especially what's already happening at institutions in Canada, where you see something, we can get that into the CanSSOC process as Ren ISAC or other partners who are in this space as well are seeing things that are particular to our space. These are the things we care most about. It's important to know what's happening sort of globally when it comes to threat information, but it has to be contextualized. Something that's attacking an energy sector or a hospital may not be relevant to most of the colleges and universities in the country. And so we want to be able to curate that information. Again, it's a big theme here. So you can see we can take these pieces, and this might come in from any avenue. It could be an automated alert, but it could also just be an email to a CanSSOC analyst who then takes it and starts looking at it. as you work through it, there's an initial curation of intelligence, just sort of making sure, is this industry specific, all of those things I've talked about. If we do think, once we've seen it, that it's relevant, then does this affect any particular institution? If it does, you go up on this chart. And one of the important pieces is looking at, does this enhance our threat feed service? So are we seeing new IOCs? Are we seeing new actionable threat intelligence information? If so, then it goes into the threat feed and is updated there. First. So we want to make sure we get it into the threat feed. And this is what we saw recently with some of the denial of service attacks, is a number of institutions started to see denial of service activity. One of the member institution, one of the partner institutions gave some IOCs to CanSSOC. We got that into the threat feed. And while we were developing the alerts, the threat feed already deployed it. And by the time we got the both alerts and advisories out, other institutions were already blocking against it and didn't even have an issue with that. So it's a really exciting example of how this all works together. Once the threat feed is updated, then this is where the curation and contextual analysis starts. And obviously this is something that's going to grow over time, but these are some different examples of the type of curation that can happen, because we've got an analysis engine that we're building out, and certainly looking at things like the other open source intelligence information we've collected, if we've collected it. It's also looking at things like known vulnerabilities, if it's relevant at the institution, if we have it. It's correlating it with things like the benchmarking data, if it's available, which has some vulnerability information. There's also the need to start building out some critical asset lists. And this is something where, again, there's a lot of opportunity for crossover there. Anyways, there's a lot of time, we can spend a lot of time, and we should spend a lot of time talking about the rich ways in which we can contextualize information and curate that data. But the important point is this happens at several steps, because it's both the contextual analysis if we think it's institution specific, but even if it's not, we want to curate that information for the broader community as well too. And so if you go to the bottom half of this, you can see that in addition to the threat alert service, this also goes into the advisory service, which then has both the IOC identification. It can still update the threat feed. In addition to something that, depending on the specifics, we might share it with other partners as well too, and send out advisory and alerts. And so this is happening today. This is all actioned. We've sent out a number of both individual alerts, a number of individual advisory services, all without collecting any logs. And the bulk of that really goes into the threat feed service. And so here's where we're at today with the threat feed service. We have 33 individual institutions directly onboarded, and there's a number of ways you can onboard. We talked about that a little bit, so I'm not going to break that apart too much, but if you've got some questions, we can certainly answer them today. So we've got 33 institutions currently actively onboarded. We're talking with 11 more that are, they've already signed the agreements, and we're just working on setting them up, and then we're actively talking to 12 more. In addition, we're working with a number of partners to do onboarding as well too. So most of these are the NREN provincial partners, but we are also working with CIRA and some others. So the threat feed, for example, is something that's getting aligned with the CIRA DNS firewall, so we can exchange information in both directions. So if you use that service, you can get the protection from the threat feed, and conversely, if they identify issues that we need to know, we can put them in the threat feed, and we can move them back and forth. And that's a really important part about this. I know I've said this a couple of times, but I'm going to intentionally belabor the point, which is the partners and the members and everybody generating information. This is our own threat intelligence information. So obviously we've partnered with commercial partners and government partners to continue to get a rich set of data that we can work with. But for us, what's really important is seeing information come from what we're actually seeing and get into these services so that we can act on them. And the bottom half of this chart represents some of what's happening with that. So the CanSSOC analysts themselves, the CanSSOC project team has identified through the work they've done 38 events. So, events is a bigger activity, and we're trying to stay really focused. So there's a lot of things that are happening. We're not looking at trying to find all of them. We're trying to find the things that really matter. And it's a labor intensive process, which is why the numbers are, you might think that in some ways they're relatively small, but that's exactly what we're going for, is focusing on the things that really matter when we talk about somebody hands-on looking at things. So we've contributed 38 events. which constitute about 76,000 IOCs. So this could be file hashes, this could be IP addresses, this could be sort of any of that kind of information. And that's the number you really want to pay attention to is, are there artifacts that help us detect faster and better? The different partners have contributed 539, and this is where it's really exciting. And so again, when you have an individual who's sort of working through these things, it's going to be thoughtful and appropriate, but one individual can't do this all on their own. So as different partners detect events, we're getting those back into the system. So 539 events with 247,000 individual IOCs. And then when you take those and you combine them with all the other data sources we have, you can see that we're currently managing 75,000 active events and over $4 million IOCs, individual attributes to this information. And again, these are being delivered through several different channels that people can use. I think this is incredible. Obviously, I'm biased in this, but to me, this is exactly where we wanted to be with this, which is getting people onboarded, using these data, and really generating and maintaining an active list of events. The curation of this, again, is really important. These things, especially the IOCs, they can go stale. They can get especially when you've got reporting from these other partners, they can have things that we don't want to block. So they could have, Microsoft or Google or Amazon or any of these things. So all of these are curated, especially the things coming out of the team and the partners are curated to make sure that we're not adding anything that's a negative effect to the landscape. Another piece of the basic services, and we talked about this a little bit last time, is the vulnerability management service. And we've got a lot of questions about that. So I'm going to say a few more words about this, and certainly if you've got more questions, we can talk through this. There's a lot of things a vulnerability management service could be. We actually are really excited about where we could go with this. From my perspective, the point of building out the vulnerability management service was to do enhancement and contextual analysis on detection and response. So if you've done any of this before, you know that you can get alerts for things that are false positives or are not accurate to an asset, just because you see something, especially if they're based off of a signature, if they're based off of sort of a static analysis rule, it may not have all of the information. And so, for example, if you get an alert that a web server has been remotely exploited, it's helpful to know if the server is actually, if it's possible to exploit that remotely. So vulnerability scanning is one of the ways that we can enrich that information. But like these other things we've built out, the threat feed service being the best example of that, it doesn't make sense to build this in a way that is just specifically for that detection and response service. So, and again, we talked through this a little bit last time, but this allows us, in addition to enriching the detection and response data, allows us to also start taking different data sources and put them in one dashboard. So, and you saw a little bit of this last time, which is taking different data sources like Shodan, like the scanners themselves, and then you can add other things. You can imagine something like the BitSite data and the benchmarking data and security scorecard and these other data sources and other ones that we're looking at as well too. And so you can get a much better picture, and especially if they're services that we already have or for services that we can get at scale at a better cost for all of us, it makes a lot more sense. In addition, that dashboarding that's being built out allows members to build a vulnerability posture from those data sources over time. And we've got the unique ability to also be able to create some peer comparisons through the benchmarking project. So there's some really interesting opportunities there as well too. And like sort of going back to the beginning, many institutions have invested in vulnerability management. So this is not being designed to replace your existing investments if you've got them. But certainly if you don't have them, this is a really great place to start as we build out the service. And if you do have it, you may not have all of these unique views. So there is still, we think, value in there. So again, even as we look at institutions that have these services, we're building this with the intention of serving even the needs of those institutions. So you can sort of see that sort of across the board. And so at the end of the day, this allows us to provide that much more accurate the alerts and information, and be able to create that more holistic view of all the vulnerabilities that are being seen sort of across the services in one place. And an update to this, here's the timeline that we're looking at is sort of the initial discovery release is going to be in Q1 of this year. So this is working off of the calendar year. So some of the limited data sources and the ability to use the dashboard. There's going to be more coming out about this, but we're looking at sort of doing this sort of initial release in Q1. Through the middle of the year, we'll be adding different data sources, like I talked about, as we look at our partners and what they can provide, and continuing to work on that dashboard. And then right now, all of this is really external focused. What we want to be able to do as we get to the end of the year is really not only start getting some deeper insights into the vulnerability information, especially really like this is going to be right now just focused on the vulnerabilities that are being seen. One of the curation pieces that we can do is also really start to make sure we've got a really strong sense of what are the highest risk vulnerabilities, the key vulnerabilities, to make sure we can focus in on that. And as we mature the scanning process itself, we can start really looking at expanding into internal scanning as well too. So like I said, I want to leave plenty of time for questions and comments, and it definitely looks like we've got some. So I'm going to stop there. I'm really excited about what we've done, and hopefully you've seen how we've started to put some of these pieces together to build not only sort of those basic services that I think that we all either need or can get value out of, and the way that these start to build our road to the advanced detection as well too, as we start to actually get log information. If we're doing all of this really good, we can take the log information and make it even more valuable, get even better alerts, get even more actionable information.
Thanks, Isaac. So we'll now sort of open it up and encourage everybody to use the chat function within Zoom to ask questions. So first, but before we do that, I guess I would just say one of the things that I want to emphasize is that as we move forward, we're really eager to evolve the services and thinking and what we're looking to do next with input from the community. And so while we've laid out a lot of what we've seen based on sort of working inside the space, I'm eager to get more input. We're all eager to get more input and want your feedback about how we should evolve these. So one of the ones that's come up on threat feed that I'll just highlight is, how did you pick the sources that you're pulling into the feed, and what about other sources? We want your input. So if there's sources that are coming in that you think if there's additional sources out there that you think make a lot of sense to add it, maybe your institution is doing it and we see 20 institutions across the country are including this, then we want to know about that, because we will add, we will subtract if there's something that isn't of value, and we really want this to be collaborative as we move forward. That's a really specific example, but that applies to all of the services and supports that we have out there. So the first question we have is from Ian. The question is, how/when will these alerts be sent out? It was related to the alerting service that you talked about. I can answer it, or Isaac, do you want to take it?
Okay.
So this is right now how we're sending these out is just by email. So when we see, going back to what Isaac said, see something, say something. When we see something, we draft something up and we contact that institution via email. If we have a relationship with a provincial partner, then we are eager to work with that provincial partner to have them involved in the conversation, or have them add potentially additional context that they might know about your organization, and potentially have them contact you in the best way possible. So we're really, right now it's email, but again, we're open to feedback and thoughts as to the best way. We've also started using Slack as a communication tool that we have. And so when you sign up to Threat Feed and engage with us in that way, you get added to a few Slack channels. One is dedicated to your institution that you can use to ask individual questions, or get us to send you individual pieces of information. You also get added to a channel that has documentation on the services, and on the threat feed service, as well as threat intel. And so when we have these general pieces of information, we again send those out via email, but we also post them on that threat intel channel. So again, open to thoughts and feedback.
Yeah, I want to add one thing to that. So the community building is really important, and so certainly this webinar is another sort of us talking out. But these communities, like the Slack community we're building out, in addition to the individual institutions having an opportunity to have a direct line of communication to analysts, to me, what's really important, maybe not all of you have heard me talk about this, is also connecting institutions to institutions. Because this is not just about somebody with a CanSSOC analyst name doing some work. This is also about getting people connected in a way too. So certainly, this is beyond the question that was asked. This is not an alert question anymore, but having the opportunity to be able to ask those questions, or if somebody else sees something, and this is not, the SIG already does a really good job of sharing information. So it is community building beyond that. It's not trying to replicate what's going on there, but certainly there's an opportunity to take this information and share it in many different ways. And so we see an opportunity to also continue to build those relationships when it comes to the operational detection and response.
Thanks, Isaac. So next question from Peter Willenese at Canary. Hi, Isaac. Great presentation and a compelling illustration of the network effect, achieving web scale through combining event data. I'm interested in your thoughts on where the most significant challenges lie: technology, people, partnering, organizational construct.
Yeah, I think it depends on which part of the process you're talking about. For me right now, I think it's the expertise. I think that we have a lot of challenges making sure that we've got enough people with enough information. It's going to quickly change, I think, as we continue to build these things out, and it's going to change to just access to information, because contextualizing this information is really the most expensive part, but you need the expertise to do it. So we need to continue to build out the individuals with the ability to work in these areas and work together. And I'm not talking about, sort of people working in Canslock. I'm talking about all of the analysts across the country, making sure they've got the information and access to the tools that they need to do these areas, to do these services. But once we get past sort of building out sort of expertise, and maybe a little bit of working together, it's going to come down to, can we get enough contextual information? Can we manage the logs? It's also going to be very expensive to do that. It's one of the reasons why we're continuing to iterate on the advanced detection and response. We're not coming out with sort of a beautiful, simple picture of what it looks like, because it's expensive and it takes time to build out. We want to do it in a way that's meaningful. It doesn't just generate a ton of alerts. But to get to there, I think we need to start with building out the expertise.
Thanks, Isaac. So we'll just give 1 or 2 more minutes to see if any additional questions come in. And while that is being done, I'll just say, if you have additional questions and or want to reach out to us, you can send a note to info@canslock.ca. We also have a report at canslock.ca. If you want to report an incident or engage in that way. We're on Twitter, and we also have our URL for the YouTube channel, where all this webinar, as well as our past webinars, will be posted. We will be sending out a note to all attendees with a survey at the end, both in terms of webinar, but also asking a couple of questions on the content in terms of starting to get a feeling for what is it that interests your institution. So if you have a couple of minutes and can complete that survey, we would really appreciate that input and feedback. As I sort of already alluded to, we're really eager to evolve and develop as we move forward based on what the needs of the community are. And so if you have a need, or you have an idea, or you have a concern, please reach out and engage with us, because we're interested in getting that feedback. One of the other activities we're going to undertake in the next couple of months is Indranil and the analyst team is going to reach out to some institutions and set up that are open, and set up a time to have a conversation and really start to understand what it is your institution is facing in terms of challenges, get your feeling on information that we may have already sent you or may be looking to send you. Do you want this information? How much information? Do you want more? What's the right mechanism? So that we can start to provide the maximum value to all institutions in Canada and inform how we evolve things when we move forward. So with that, Isaac, any final comments, or Hugo or Indranil?
No, just thank you for your time, and really appreciate not only the opportunity to speak with you, but your, as Jill's already said, your feedback on this. We've obviously done a lot of work to put this together in a way that we think makes sense, but this is for the community, by the community, and your feedback, your participation, and not just using the services that we're building out, whether or not you're a member, but participating in the conversation is a critical piece to this. This is not something we're looking to drive through just what we see as the opportunities and needs, but by what you see as the opportunities and the needs.
Great. Thanks, Hugo and Indranil, for joining us as well. Appreciate it. And with that, we will end the session. Thanks all. Have a good day.